Would you buy this $4 million commercial property if it put $44,000 a year of passive income into your bank account? On paper, it's a solid deal, 5.5% yield, solid national tenant, not far from the Sydney CBD. But here's the truth, numbers on paper don't tell the whole story. Behind every deal, there are hidden risks, and today I'm going to analyse the property to see if it's a good deal or not. So let's get into it. So this property is in Oatley in Sydney, sold for $4.1 million. And as you can see from the properties, it's on a corner block, and you're actually only getting half the building. So you're getting the top level and one retail space, and the rest of the other corner, you're not actually buying it. Someone else owns it. So it's on a corner block, which is a good location. It's got car parks out the back. You're sharing it with other tenants, obviously, but it's on a corner location. This is a pretty busy street as well. So it gets a lot of traffic. And it's in a decent residential area. So there's a lot of apartments, and Oatley is not far from Hurstville, which is really dense population, not far from Cronulla as well, and the train station's only a couple streets away, and across the road is the post office and the library as well. So it's in a pretty good location, and it's currently occupied by Colitis Health, which is a pretty big medical facility in Australia with 39 practices. So it's a decent national tenant with a 5-year lease and a net income of $228,000 a year. So obviously they've refitted the place. It's purposely built for a medical pathology centre. And because they've fitted out the property, it's more likely that they're going to stay there for the long term, because it costs a lot to refit different properties. And obviously, if they're putting a lot of investment into refitting the property, they think they're going to stay there for the long term. So they're likely going to renew the lease after the 5 years. So let's get into analysing, would you buy this $4 million commercial property? So as we know, it's in a decent location. It's not far from the Sydney CBD. It's a corner block. And you're only getting half the building, so the office space at the top and the actual first retail shop out front. Purchase price of $4.1 million. Gross income of $228,000 a year. It's a retail asset with Colitis Health as a tenant over a 5-year lease. Now, they put a lot of money into refitting the property, so they're likely to renew the lease. But let's look at the cash flow to see what sort of passive income this property is going to generate. So the property sold for $4.1 million. It's got a net income of $228,000, which means it's a 5.57% yield. So a pretty low yield, but you're getting a long-term tenant, which is stable income. There's a lot of health sort of practices stay there for the long term. And assuming a 6.5% interest only, you're looking at the rent of $228,000 a year, interest repayments of $183,000 a year. So you're looking at that cash flow of $44,000 a year of passive income just from this one property, which is a decent amount of income, especially if you're not having to do much. It's coming in every single month, this sort of income. And if you look at our cash flow snapshot, because it's such a low yield, there's not a huge buffer in terms of how much interest rates can actually go up, and you can actually still hold on to the property without it being negatively geared. So if it goes up to 8% interest rates, looking at being negatively geared about $1,200 a year. But if it goes up to 12% interest rates, this is just interest only, you're going to be negatively geared over $100,000 a year just from holding on to this one property. So commercial property isn't great if it's negatively geared. It's only great if it's positively geared. So if interest rates go down to 3%, that's when you're positively geared $142,000 a year. So this is a great property because it's a lower yield. It's a good property if interest rates go down. It's got a long-term tenant as well, so it's good in terms of holding onto the property long-term if interest rates are low. And if we look at our passive income pay down calculator, same purchase price, same yield, using a 4% rental increase, no extra repayments that first year, and I'm assuming a 5% interest rate. That's going to be over the whole life of the loan. So it's going to take you almost 15 years to pay off the loan, which is a long time for commercial property. But after that 15 years, you're going to be generating almost $400,000 a year in passive income. So it's a good long-term hold. There aren't probably many value-add strategies to actually increase the income of the property because it's got a long-term tenant already. They've done a fit out. It's in a good location, so there isn't, more floor space that you can add. But it is a good property if you want something that's buy and hold, not many headaches. It's got a health tenant that's going to stay there for the long term. So it's probably something that's not going to cause many headaches. It's something that you can buy once and hold for a long time. It'll gradually pay off the debt. and give you a pretty big income, $300,000, $400,000 a year in passive income just from one property is pretty amazing. But if we actually look at and analyze what are the risks with buying this property, there are four main risks. So there's tenant risk, vacancy risk, market risk, and asset risk. So the tenant risk is, will they pay their rent? And could the business be disrupted, and could they close down? Obviously, it's a national tenant with 39 retailers, so they're more than likely, got to be paying the rent on time. It's a strong cash flowing business. Healthcare, it's a pretty profitable business to be in. So it's got a good tenant, so it's a low tenancy risk. Now the vacancy risk, obviously they've done a fit out, so they're likely to stay there for the long term. There is a bit of supply in terms of actual commercial retail buildings in the area. So there's a long street of commercial property, so there's likely that the property may go vacant, but because it's in a good location, there's a lot of foot traffic in the area. It's likely that the property's not going to go vacant, and it's got a good tenant that's done a big fit out. So the vacancy risk is low, but you can actually mitigate this risk by understanding what the vacancy rate for medical tenants in the area is, and then putting a buffer in place to actually pay off that debt when the property, or if the property does go vacant. So the market risk, is there an oversupply in the area or economic downturns? So you've got to buy, to reduce this risk, you're going to look at buying below replacement costs and buy in areas with stable population. So Lee, it's not far from Hurstville. There's a lot of gentrification in the area, and it's got a huge population growth. And it's not far from Sydney CBD. It's got good train lines as well, which means there's always going to be a stable population living in the area. So it's, the market's not a bad market. It's not far from the Sydney CBD, which is always a good market to be in if you're in Sydney. And if we look at asset risk, we're looking at, are you going to need to knock down the building? Is it going to collapse anytime soon? Does it need lots of maintenance costs or any compliance issues? So you want to be doing building and pest inspections and budget for any maintenance things. Because it's on a corner block, because it's a decent sized property, it looks a bit old, but there obviously are older buildings in the street. So it looks like one of the newer buildings in the street, but it still looks a bit dated and old. Oatley is a pretty old school area, working class area. So you're probably going to have to invest in some sort of renovations and upkeep for the property. But solid brick doesn't look too bad. So I think overall this is a pretty low risk investment. The only risk that you're probably going to have with these sorts of property is interest rates and holding cost risk. And managing your cash flow, because it's such a low yielding property, you're going to be having to put more buffers in place if interest rates start to go up. And obviously that's going to make the cost of holding the property more expensive. So you're going to have buffers in place. And obviously it's going to take a while for the property to be paid off. So the main risks are obviously those interest rates going up. And overall, this property is more of a long-term play where you don't want many headaches. There aren't many value-add opportunities for this property. It's something that you just buy, set and forget. It's going to be generating a pretty decent passive income. It might take a while for the property to be paid off, but it's going to be generating a healthy income, in 15 years, almost $400,000 a year in passive income from this one property. So if you enjoyed videos like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more. And check out my latest video where I broke down the difference between one commercial property versus 4 to see which one's better. So go watch that video next, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out.